Hello, my name is Omar Moore. I'm a film critic, a podcaster, an attorney, and a lot of other things as well. And welcome to this feature-length audio commentary for Thelma and Louise, directed by Ridley Scott, written by Callie Curry. For the next 2+ hours, you will be stuck with me. Well, I'm recording this, and you hear the sound effects in the background, in the 30-year anniversary of this great film, Thelma and Louise, as you see there on the screen. The opening I always have found to be beautiful and sad. When I first saw the film, I didn't understand, but of course, having seen the film, you see that this is really the aftermath and not the beginning. It's a rewind. This is really a recollection story, as we see the black and white memory, and photographs are powerful, and that memory fade, and then slowly the color gets dialed up in the vision that we see before us, and that color becomes more intense as we really are traveling backwards. It's a very effective technique. Hans Zimmer with the music here, which is just fantastic. I love this music. Callie Curry there, one of the co-producers, she also wrote the screenplay. It's an excellent script. It really is. And she won the Oscar for this back in 1992. Adrian Biddle's photography is just fantastic, and you'll get to see that here. I hope you've seen this movie before. It's been 30 years. Where have you been? Well, if you've not seen the movie, maybe you haven't been, I don't know, maybe you're a few years old and not as old as I am. So we see the hustle and bustle of where Louise, played by Susan Sarandon, works. And she's doing something that we know that women have often done, which is be a waitress. That is something that is a working class occupation typically. There's this judgment that Louise has of these women, and then she asks them about smoking. You're too young, aren't you, to be smoking? And of course, she smokes. There's this transition to the chaotic situation of Thelma, played by Gina Davis, and she's rushing around. And it's this scenario of a woman like Thelma, played by Gina Davis, talking about asking her husband for permission to do something, which even for someone who is an adult should not be something that you should be doing. And I understand that relationships are different for everybody, but if anybody has to ask permission to go out with a friend, it's probably a signal that that relationship is not a positive, healthy one. There's Christopher McDonald, the husband of Thelma, and he's just a piece of crap. It's so bizarre that there were a cross-section of men. It wasn't a large group of men, but there were some white male film critics and some white males overall, a small segment of them who were somehow offended by this film. How could you be offended by a film that is looking at two women as they navigate through this patriarchal, male, misogynistic, sexist world? How can you be offended by what they see, when what they see is a true and accurate reflection of how men behave toward the female gender? I mean, that's just self-evident. the clunkiness of Christopher McDonald here as he falls. Oh dear, it's just the physical comedy of, of Chris McDonald is really funny, and that license plate that says the one. It does play up these kinds of things about men, that he drives this particular car, and that's just God. So we see here the two protagonists, Louise there on the phone to Thelma there on the phone, and they're just putting together their arrangements for the trip that they're going on. In this day and age, they would be doing this probably on FaceTime or text. I don't know that they would be picking up phones. Even if they had cell phones, I think they'd just be texting each other. I think Thelma and Louise would have been two texters, no matter their age. I think just the rapport between them, as you will see and you no doubt know, I think is more of a texting environment, but I could be wrong about that. Maybe it is a rapport where they would pick up a phone and talk about arrangements and where they would get together. The soundtrack to this film is really good. B.B. King is amongst the artists. Glenn Frey, Marianne Faithfull, just great artists, really great artists, and others as well. Johnny Nash, and I'll be talking about Johnny Nash, the late great Johnny Nash, later on. Look at the artifacts, right? Look at where they live, the environment that they're in. There's this very kind of staid 1950s-ish type look to where they live, even in the environment that they are in. The set decoration seems to suggest something like that, and they're very dressed as these very housewifey type figures, and the colors that they wear, the floral patterns that they may wear, the jean jackets, the, I don't know, mom jeans, whatever it might be. It's very staid and, contained is the word I guess I want to use. And they're packing the things into the car, the fishing rods, and you see all the things that Thelma's gathering up. And look at those shades that Louise is wearing. I love those shades. Susan Sarandon wears the hell out of those. I mean, can we put a kitchen sink in there too, Thelma? Here's the iconic moment. We're going to see that reprised, of course, in the movie at the end. And we all know what happens at the end. These two strawberry blonde white women on this adventure, middle-aged women who are on an adventure, and there's no wrong in that. It's about time that happens, right? That two people, and it's happened, of course. I'm being slightly facetious, but people were hailing this as a revolutionary film, and I love this film so much, but I don't know that it was revolutionary. I don't know. Maybe it was. Maybe you'll take issue with me being nonchalant about that. I don't intend to poo-poo anything about Thelma and Louise as a movie. I think I would really laugh in the faces of the men who found this film offensive. Oh, it's offensive to men. That was the kind of nonsense that people were actually saying in 1991. One of the things you're going to notice if you've never seen this film before, and again, I hope you have before you've elected to listen to this commentary, is that their wardrobe and this is not for sexist references, it's just for cinematic reference. The wardrobe of Thelma and Louise, like it does for characters in any movie, will change. But I think in this film it's even more important. And not because that there are two women modeling fashions that it's important. It's important because the clothing they wear is a reflection of the lives they are living. And once they begin to go on this road trip and the twists and turns that this road trip will take, that clothing also becomes a really key part of their identities and in their transitions. And I'll get to talk about that as well as we go along here. They've got these large sunglasses on, and it's as if they're living in this kind of culture in the United States that is about fashions and trends, and everything is big and somewhat a playground, I think. And it seems in some ways idealistic. It seems too sunny, and the sunniness seems to be extra bright. But this film vacillates between dark and light, and sometimes within the same few seconds of a scene. There are people who say that the film is feminist. I don't know if it is. Yes, on some level, I would say that it is, in the sense that you've got two women who are yearning to be free and free on their own terms, and they certainly get to do that for sure, as we know. But is it a feminist film? You don't see either character, Thelma or Louise, advocating for enhanced freedoms or women's rights, but that's not the definition of feminism. They don't have to burn their bras, if you will, proverbially, or they don't have to give a speech that says women's rights are human rights, as Hillary Clinton once did. They don't have to, raise their fists in the air for a film or for them to be feminists. Now, I will say this, maybe the film isn't, maybe, I'll say this, I don't know that the film is feminist, but I don't think that the two characters are feminists. What I think is that those two characters that we're seeing, Thelma and Louise, are characters who just want to live their lives and be left the hell alone, and to live life on their terms without some man getting in the way or obstructing them or insulting them or attacking them or raping them, as we see here. I mean, this is really rough stuff, and I want to say in advance that some of the conversation may be triggering for some who listen to this commentary. One of the things you will notice here is that both Susan Sarandon and Gina Davis's characters wear makeup, lipstick. It's rosy, reddish, scarlet, and you see the lipstick on them both. And then, of course, what you will notice is that as the film moves along, there's less lipstick and less makeup, because what's happening is this, as I said earlier, there is this transition in both of them, and things are being stripped away at their core, and their real authentic selves are beginning to show through, uninhibited, untutored by the misogynistic and patriarchal culture and sexism and misogyny of men, and the patriarchy culture, the patriarchy that dominates. And they are living life on their terms. And so you won't see these kinds of things that typically women in the world have to navigate or have to wear in order to get through a day, right? Typically, no matter what the race of a woman is, she will end up at some point during the day inevitably wearing some kind of makeup or lipstick. And of course, that's her prerogative. I'm not judging that one way or another. But what I'm saying is that these kinds of things are all trappings of a patriarchy that says that women have got to wear makeup. You know, men are never told to do that, right? I mean, of course, if they're reading the news, it's another story. You see both of them here, Thelma and Louise, laughing, and it's as if they are reborn. They look really happy and comfortable. Freedom, you know, the light, even the way the cinematography is going, Adrian Biddle's cinematography, and how the light is shined on their faces, and you get a full open face look at both of them. Their faces are bathed in light typically, and there's this idealism, as I said earlier, this sunniness that's almost too good to be true. You know, it's really bright and sunny and resplendent, and it's very interesting stuff, and the cinematography makes it interesting. As I remember it, Thelma and Louise was released just around Memorial Day weekend in 1991 or thereabouts. It was a huge hit. I think it made, well, I don't know, between 80 and 100 and some odd $1 million at the time in 1991. It got a lot of attention. As I said, there were some men, white men particularly, who were a small group of whom, it wasn't a huge amount, but of course it got the press talking, who were offended by the way that men were depicted. Oh my gosh, it's just laughable. You know, all the movies that you've ever seen where women are put in these very compromising, deeply offensive, misogynistic positions and stories that are really utterly repugnant and misogynistic. And one movie comes out in 1991 that shows two women wanting to live their lives and wanting to escape men and the toxicity of men and this toxic masculinity of men, and all of a sudden you've got white men, some of them jumping up and down going, oh my god, this is terrible, how could you show men like this? One movie after centuries or 100 years of women being oppressed and suppressed in films. Although of course you remember back in the 1930s, if you're old enough, if you're of a certain age, or even if you're not, in the 1930s, women had a lot more access to controlling storylines. I mean, they wrote screenplays in abundance. You had some excellent female screenwriters. As I said, there's a lot of light and dark in Thelma and Louise, the movie, and sometimes in the very same few moments of a scene. And now we're beginning to see some of the dark, right? Which is the sickness that Thelma's feeling now after drinking too much alcohol and not eating anything. And you've got this strange man that she's left with, and you've got trouble. Oh my God, that really does look like the 1980s, not the 1990s. Women packed into a bathroom. What's interesting is, of course, this is way before the COVID era that we are in, at least certainly at the time I'm recording this, in the 30th anniversary year of Thelma and Louise. If you do the math, you'll know which year that is. Here's more of the dark, and here we go, the trigger warning for those of you. We're seeing a rape about to happen, and we have to fight back and end toxic masculinity, male violence, and end this violence against women, which you are seeing right now. This is really awful. It makes me retch in horror, and it makes me want to, well, I want to do something about this. I want to end this stuff. I know one person alone can't do it. But I try to do what I can to raise awareness, and amongst men particularly, because ultimately it's going to be men and boys who change their behavior, who must change their behavior, so that we don't see these kinds of scenes, and so that these scenes don't happen in real life anymore, you know, and so that the laws don't allow them to happen in real life, because we've seen the horrors of this, and there were lots of laws in the books that allowed this to happen. I mean, this is really an evil thing here that you're watching. But this part is not, with Susan Sarandon's character Louise. Ain't that a gun to the head, right? Ain't that a kick in the head? Well, there we go. That is a sure sign of it, isn't it? The audience, when I saw this in the movie theater when it first came out back in 1991, I watched it with an audience in Brooklyn, New York, and they were so quiet at this moment where Sarandon's got the gun out and pointing it at this man who's just raped Thelma. I mean, he's literally just raped her, and the audience is quiet as a mouse with this moment. And look at the eyes, look at those eyes. When I see Susan Sarandon in this particular film, it reminds me of Bette Davis. She certainly does. Bette Davis would always act with her eyes. Well, not always, but... Ooh, my goodness me. Boom, 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 bang. And there we go. Yes, you shot him, Louise. And I applauded that moment in the movie theater. When that happened, when Susan Sarandon pulled that trigger and blew him away, I noticed, I applauded that in the theater, by the way. The audience looked at me, some of them looked at me like I was, I had 17 heads or something. I only have one head on my shoulders. I think that when you saw that shot there twice of the man who was the rapist that Louise kills, it's a really strong image, and it's a good one in terms of this self-defense mode that Louise has, defense of another. That's a very common thing in American jurisprudence and law, that you can defend another person. If they cannot defend themselves, then you have a right to use deadly force in defense of another. And that's one of the exceptions of force rule. And as a person, you can use force on behalf of someone else to defend them and yourself. And so Louise takes that gauntlet and really lowers the hammer on this guy, and he deserved it. I applauded that. And again, these people in the movie theater looked at me like I was nuts. It's interesting how people get so quiet when women exact violence against men. And especially, in any situation, including in the self-defense situation you just saw. But male violence is constantly applauded. I mean, female violence against men never gets applauded, or rarely does, but male violence against women almost always gets applauded. Certainly male violence against men does, and women committing violence against other women. But when it's women committing violence against men, you will not hear, generally speaking, at least in the 1990s you did not hear people cheering that and applauding it. But when you had men committing violence against other men, oh my gosh, forget it. It was unbelievable. So we see this turn again, right? We see this light dark, and we're still in the darker regions of this movie. And it's this constant changing of themes. Which character between the two of them is in the ascendancy in terms of who is controlling a situation, or rather, who is the person in this relationship between these two women, who is the more dominant figure, the more in control figure, if you will, versus the one who's kind of more like the child, more like the, and excuse me for saying child, but more like the person that is really spinning their wheels and kind of not, kind of not together. They're all over the place. And that shifts between Thelma and Louise throughout the movie. Right now, it's Louise who has the upper hand in terms of she's controlled. She's more like the adult between them. Whereas Thelma looks more and sounds more at this point like someone who just doesn't seem to comprehend what's going on. Do you notice here now, as they're sitting at this diner, you see the light and some of the shadow of the Venetian blind is crossing over Gina Davis's face there. And again, that's the great cinematography of Adrian Biddle. What he's doing there is giving us these kind of gray areas or these kinds of nuanced looks at these characters as they begin to transition. Obviously, Thelma has just been raped, and so you see this kind of taint, and it's kind of this cinematic way of branding her, which is kind of, I don't know what to think of that, because Thelma, obviously nobody asked to be raped. There's just no such thing. Nobody. Harvey Keitel there talking to someone who is the waitress in the restaurant or bar where they've been, where Thelma and Louise have been. Harvey Keitel plays a pivotal figure in this film as the police detective who has a great deal of empathy for both Thelma and Louise, but he still has to play by these male patriarchal rules, and he benefits from them. So I kind of think that the movie provides Keitel with a certain level of being of an out in a way. He benefits from the very rules that he is trying to tell his other male officers, fellow male law enforcement people, not to take advantage of. There's always this playfulness between men and women in this movie as well, though. The manager or the co-worker in the diner where Louise worked, who was flirting with Thelma, and asking her, "When are you going to run away with me?" And just now, you saw again this moment with Harvey Keitel on this occasion and the waitress, and how they're kind of flirting, and Keitel's character says, "Well, would you have a little teensy wincy drink with me?" And that's another flirting thing. So the movie does have time for that. It's not an unrealistic movie in any way, shape, or form. What we are seeing here and what you see here before you, every frame of it has happened in real life. I mean, there's one moment or two moments in the film that probably never have happened in real life. Although you could make a case that even that's not true. And I think the two scenes I'm talking about. Certainly one of them which I'm talking about. But the point I think I'm making or trying to make is that this movie is not, this idea again that this movie is offensive to men is just garbage. There's nothing in this movie that should offend men at all. This is an accurate reflection and depiction of what men do on a daily basis, and this is not something that is made up out of whole cloth. Callie Curry is a fine screenwriter, but my goodness me, I don't think that she had to really dig deep or into the inner sanctums of her own experience to get this picture of toxic masculinity. Now, it's very interesting, this exchange here, because Gina Davis here now as Thelma, there's this competition between who really is the lead here. It really is. And in the opening credits, you saw Susan Sarandon's name first. Gina Davis is right alongside her next. Yet, when this film is often referred to, Gina Davis gets mentioned first. And I guess it's because she obviously plays Thelma, but also because I think of the two performances, both of which are excellent, I would say that Gina Davis is probably just that little bit better. When both of them were nominated for the Academy Award in 1992, that meant surely neither of them would win it, because when you have two actors in the same movie nominated, usually neither wins, although that's not always true. This notion of the feminism in this movie and that the movie is a feminist film, again, I do not entirely agree with that. I would argue, as I said earlier, I don't even think that Thelma and Louise are feminists in the classic sense, whatever the classic sense is, in the sense that they are the stereotypical bra burner or someone of that nature. That's a really lazy and dangerous stereotype, actually. Um, they're people who just want their freedom. They just want their liberation. They're not feminists in any other way, I don't think. And I think the film is not necessarily a feminist film either. I just think it's a film that depicts, and forgive me for being so generic in general, but it's a film that depicts these women who want to breathe free. It's as if they are Lady Liberty, and they just want to be able to breathe, god damn it, for just a few moments in their lives. And so I think that's more what we're looking at here, more than a feminist film. We do love to label things, don't we? I mean, we do love to label things at every opportunity. And I'm not so sure, again, that this is a feminist movie in the classic sense. Because the character here, Louise, is asking her boyfriend, or estranged boyfriend, Jimmy, played by Michael Madsen, to wire some money. She's leaning on a man to do this, and the Bechdel test, I guess, remains undefeated as far as this movie is concerned, because it's Bechdel 1, Thelma and Louise nil. And look up the Bechdel test if you don't know what I'm talking about. Bechdel. Bechdel test. Look that up when you have a chance. Glenn Fry, Part of Me, Part of You. Great tune there. Glenn Fry, of course, of the Eagles, now the late, great Glenn Fry. Although, he had his not so great moments, I'll tell you that. But that song was really good. Part of You, Part of Me. In fact, it also plays in during the end credits of the film. I just love this shot. And we see this whole vast paradise, or I guess it's that cornfield. I don't know what that is. It just looks really nice. As you can see, the shades are still on for Susan Sarandon's character Louise. For Thelma, Gina Davis's character, the shades are off. There's something going on with Thelma. That's one of the big reasons I love this film, is the transitions that happen. The road trip is a metaphor for that in film, and often we've seen some great films in noir films too, back in the day, like Detour, I believe that was the 1940s. You know, a film like Gun Crazy from 1950, for example, and other films where the road was used as, you know, this not only escape, but it was also an identity revealer. It was a revealer of who people are. It was a metaphor for who they are, who they were, and the road is an important variable in American movies, but not just American movies. The road trip movie, the road is not just an American film thing, it's also an American thing in general. It's this kind of thing that the United States hangs its hat on. You know, it's freedom. It's about freedom. It's about this liberation. It's about these moments of invincibility. Look at this shot here of Susan Sarandon in a phone booth. Look at the way she's changing her wardrobe or her look right before us, right? Um, I think it's very interesting how that's done, because I don't know that you always see that in films. I mean, it's a common thing, but to see a character do that and do it in a situation where they're boxed inside a telephone booth is, I think, very symbolic, because what is being said there is that a woman's alterations are still confined even when she tries to adjust her look or her the way she feels. It's being done in a box, in a phone booth, because of the trappings and suffocations of patriarchy. And what's also interesting about that scene just now is that Sarandon's talking to Michael Madsen, who is her estranged boyfriend. Everything is happening on a male's terms, pretty much. But again, this is, you know, this society that we're swimming through. So Louise has the upper hand here in terms of ordering Thelma to say and do certain things. She's the mother, if you will. Again, I apologize for the kinds of analogies, because they do sound so sexist in some ways, or very stereotypical. But there is this competition, and it's not intentional, perhaps, or per se. There is this thing between Thelma and Louise, and they do love and care about each other. But there's also this competition, I think, about who really does get to be mother, you know? Sometimes it's Thelma, sometimes it's Louise. And I think here is where Thelma begins to really take ownership and becomes a mature adult. I dare say that Thelma was living with an oppressive husband, as you obviously see there, played by Chris McDonald, who treated her like she was maybe about 12 years old. And now what's happened here is that the Thelma character has grown up, and she is beginning to answer him back, which she never would have done just a few days ago, much less now. And this road trip has already opened up something inside her, and she is just making it very clear here. I really love that. It gives me a chill, actually, and I just felt one when I watched her say, "Go fuck yourself," because it is just shows you that there's a freedom to say that, and it seems like a completely different scene from any in the film, where she's in that phone booth as Thelma, just saying that, you know, isolated in a very confined space. And of course, you've just seen Susan Sarandon's character in a phone booth herself, adjusting her hair. So they're both going through these moments of change, but it's being done in such a confined context. And I think that that's not an accident, particularly a symbolic situation. It shows you that women are trapped by this oppressive male society. It's not something that should be any kind of surprise to anybody who is a living human being. Oh, there's Brad Pitt. There you go. And he is in your living room in living color. Now, Brad Pitt, this was one of his earliest movies. In fact, I think this was or may have been his debut movie role, his first major role, if not his first role, period, on the big screen. And in just about 30 years, he's become a megastar and one of the, one of the most bankable stars in Hollywood over the last at least 25 years now. It's funny the way that they talk to each other here. It's still very sunny. And I think Brad Pitt's character brings this sunniness to Thelma, and you see Thelma really light up in response. And you see Sarandon's character, Louise, is very protective of Thelma. And whenever a man in particular tries to get near her, Sarandon's character, Louise, is there to say, "Not so fast, nicotine." Those of you of a certain age in the UK will know exactly what that reference is about. Oh, what did Daryl have to say? Well, again, it's this, this thing about two women talking about a man. The Bechdel test, and I'll tell you what it is. It states that a movie satisfies the test if it has two women on screen not talking about a man. In fact, anything other than a man. And if you look at all of these movies, that test is almost always failed. They always fail that Bechdel test. They have women typically sitting around talking about men, even when those men are on screen. It's just like, it's completely ingrained into the culture, the fabric. It's this patriarchy. If you had looked closely in the scene just a second ago, literally, before that train came across, you would have been able to see the lights. In fact, you can still see them again, the lights in the camera lights and the film lights. And you see it again there, Sarandon. She's looking around in her shades. You see the reflection of those white lights for the filming. It's so interesting. Every time you see her from this angle here, you see the lights in her sunglasses reflected. Those camera lights, those generator lights, and you see them again and again and again. Usually there's a digitization process or some kinds of lenses that are anti-reflective so that you will not see the reflection of those camera lights or cameras themselves in someone's sunglasses. But here you can see them over and over again. I always think this is interesting, how those lights are affixed, or rather put there, and you can see them reflected in the eyes. And again, it must have been a dozen times you saw the bright white lights of the movie production, and they're reflected in Sarandon's eyes, Louise's eyes. I just think that's a happy accident, but it just highlights sometimes when you're making movies, there are things you just have to live with, or things that you just have to say, okay, I'll bite the bullet on this one. Yeah, Harvey Keitel, and he's trying to close in on them, you know? He's someone, as I said earlier, who cares about their well-being, but he's got a job to do, and there's a lot of excuses not to do it, but you know he has to do it. And I think the film, and he has to because of his position as a police detective, not because I'm saying personally, well, he has to do this to tell him. No, he doesn't have to do anything. But you can see both of them having the time of their lives. They're being followed. Presumably, this is a, I don't know, a police chopper or something following them over the I don't know, over the north. I don't know, wherever the heck it is. I shouldn't say. Some of these shots are really great, you know. Now you see all of these areas now, and they've both got their shades on, but you see all these areas behind them. As this movie progresses, you're going to see less and less of that. It's going to be pure, I don't want to say wasteland, but it's going to be very empty. There'll be very few towns or structures or houses or anything as they continue to journey through, really metaphorically journeying through into themselves. I don't know. It's oh dearie me. I don't know. Brad Pitt is getting a lift, getting a ride, and then you've got here the other men, Harvey Keitel and Christopher McDonald, and you can tell that Harvey has a lot of contempt for the Chris McDonald character. I think he's toying with him here, and we get to see how really dumb and inept the character is that Chris McDonald plays. I think Chris McDonald does a really good job. I mean, in some ways it could be parody, but it's dead serious stuff. There are really men rather like this in the world, and yeah, they step in their pizza too. I find the Brad Pitt character to be um, a character that does hitchhike. He comes out of that 1970s or 60s tradition, which, I mean, hitchhiking has gone on before that, but in the 60s and 70s, hitchhiking was very common in the United States, if not elsewhere. I think in the UK as well, but particularly in the United States. And in the American West, that was a very common thing. Having pickpockets, well, yeah, having hitchhikers um, waiting to be picked up, and it was really dangerous too, I might add. Really, really dangerous. So we see this light, you know, the brightness of the scene that's going on here, and you see the wind blowing. It's a kind of brightness and carefree, you know, sunny disposition type of aspect to this particular film. At this stage of the film, the lives of Thelma and Louise are kind of as happy as you could expect them to be, given everything. And they're living their best lives. You know, it's funny, to these days we're told things like, you do you, live your best life. And those are things that are good things, and things to live by. And I think that this movie kind of, in some ways, I know some people say it's groundbreaking, and I don't know that it is. What? Because it was a movie that women did things on their terms in. Well, there are other movies where that's happened. But however you think when you think of the word groundbreaking, I do think one thing about the film that I think is particularly insightful is the way that the film sets up what it means to be happy and content, what it means for a woman to be that in a male society. And as I said, feminism to me isn't about just, well, women want to get to do things that boys do, because that's not really what feminism is. That's kind of mimicking what a man does or what a boy does. But on a powerful basis, there is some plausible aspect to why maybe feminism is defined as doing what the boys do, although I don't subscribe to that definition. I think that probably requires a discussion that goes a little bit deeper than how I just framed it, because I do think that it's important to realize that feminism is something that is really not just a movement, it's a political identity, in the sense that it's inherently so in a patriarchal society, that when you call for women's rights, that's viewed as political. And I mean, in some senses you can understand why, but why should it even be political? It's natural. This is about having all of the human species enjoy the same kinds of opportunities and the same kinds of, I don't know, what do you call that? The same kinds of opportunities that are rewarded to them. And it's not always like that. I mean, we know that. We can't be naive. Of course. I mean, these are fundamental things that, I mean, it goes without saying. We are not free until all of us are free. And I mean, that's just the truth of things, isn't it? He's gone like the wind. It's this referencing of, that movie. Oh, dear me. I don't know. It's this Brad Pitt arrives and this is his movie, and he doesn't steal the scenes, but he does have a moment or two where he does arrive and announce himself, and there's this little, what I call this little Bojangles movie does right there. I don't know if it's Bojangles, but I just kind of think that that's kind of funny. So Jimmy has wired this money, and Jimmy, of course, is the, I guess, estranged husband or estranged boyfriend of Louise, played by Susan Sarandon. And what we've seen in a scene that happened a little earlier was Michael Madsen's character, Jimmy, wiring this money. He appears in a hotel in Oklahoma City, and voila, Louise is there and says the word peaches, and there is Jimmy. There's kind of this affectionate moment between them, as they, I guess, as he tries to rekindle this relationship that has fallen off a cliff, literally. Well, not literally, but figuratively. And it's a tribute to this kind of persistence that men have when it comes to chasing after or pursuing women. We as men in Western culture and Western societies are the chasers, and I think that's true in a lot of places around the world. When we wish to pursue a woman that we desire to get to know, desire to sleep with, desire to have a relationship with and a family with, there's a pursuit that men have to do. And so Jimmy's one of these old-fashioned guys. I think Jimmy's the kind of guy who really wants to get to the heart, to this particular woman's heart. And so he's flown at least, 2 time zones to get to her and to try to propose to her. But look at how violent he's being. And this is a facet of this movie again, that we slip into the bit of the darkness here. And the lighting has changed, and we see that it's less clear and it's a little murky, and the light's not really on, and Michael Madsen's kind of in half shadow, and you see the shadow behind him there, and this demonization, not of him, but this suggestion, as we see, look at that shadow of him, silhouette reflected off the door there. That's great cinematography by Adrian Biddle. It's this second self, this shadowy figure that Michael Madsen's Jimmy character is. You know, this guy who is violent, obviously has problems controlling his temper, is clearly violent, is somebody who needs anger management, and is a toxic masculine figure. That's obvious, and I suppose and suggest, I would guess from the backstory, if I had to guess, that the backstory would have been that Jimmy is a very abusive and violent person, that Louise was forced to flee and forced to leave because his violence was just too dangerous and too violent, and just never appropriate, on no matter whether it's a little violence or a lot of violence. It was just something she was turned off by, and she probably found the wherewithal to leave. You know, a lot of women can't do that, yet she is dependent upon Jimmy economically. When she had asked Jimmy to wire, I guess, $7,000 or $9,000 to her, so he, you know, she is still utilizing his, you know, his assistance, I guess. I don't know. This pursuit of women. See, we see that Jimmy has pursued Louise, and now we're seeing the Brad Pitt character, I think his name is JD, pursuing the Thelma character played by Gina Davis, and you can tell what's going to happen here. The rain, the shimmy, the shimmering light there. You know, I mean, the cinematography is really good, and I do like what's happening here. But you see there's still this gray area. You know, look at the way it shimmies off there, the shimmer off of the door and off the side panels there. These gray areas. And even the lighting on Brad Pitt's character, we don't fully see him there. And we know why we don't fully see him. We'll find that out, of course, in a few minutes or so. So this movie cuts back again to Jimmy and Louise, and they're really talking things through. So you've got that contrasted with this, and Brad Pitt with his shirt off, and Louise is, Thelma, excuse me, is smiling there, and there's a very childish rapport and banter, and I don't mean that negatively. There's a very juvenile playfulness here, that is kind of about innocence, but also about the unexpected. And this contrast where Louise and Jimmy are talking things out and talking things through, and JD and Thelma are jumping up and down on the bed like kids, like when you used to jump on your bed or on a bed at camp, or at rather, or at, you know, wherever you might spend time. You'd jump on a bed as a 7 or 8-year-old, and you'd bounce up and down and jumped up and down on your own bed. I'm sure you did. And that's the kind of behavior that we see from Thelma and JD. I just think that there's a lot of naivete here by Gina Davis's character Thelma, and I think Gina Davis's performance, as I said earlier, is the better one between hers and Sarandon's, because she goes through more of these stages of revelation and discovery, and also learning. And she plays someone who's innocent, and she plays someone who takes charge, and who is knowledgeable about the way the world works around her. But I also think here there's some kind of playfulness and I don't know, but whatever. It's it's just this sense of, it's very playful. It's just that's the term that I come back to. It really is. You can see that Thelma is completely taken by JD, and JD is playing a role here, and he really is. I remember seeing Brad Pitt in this movie the first time I saw this movie in 1991 when it came out, and he did make an impression. And I'm not talking about him physically, even though I'm sure a lot of people find him to be very appealing physically. I thought he made an impression because of his presence, and that was certainly something that was inescapable. Here we are again. It's back to Jimmy and Louise, Louise and Jimmy. And again, the lighting not quite as pronounced. You see it dimmed a little bit. The lighting is not as bad. But you see these two people are trying to be adults, and you see that there's an adult conversation as they try to patch things up, or at least Jimmy's making an attempt to patch things up because he's the one that has not been entirely good or positive to to Susan Sarandon's character. Excuse me, to Susan Sarandon's character. That's right, the first time. Things just got real for Thelma and JD. And you're seeing the seduction now. The fun begins for both of these two. So we get to see this, right? We get to see this contrast again. We've seen that Thelma and JD have had sex, and now we're seeing the aftermath of whatever interaction Louise and JD have had, and we don't know what that is. We can assume it's sexual, it's certainly affectionate, but we know that we see the Michael Madsen character lying in bed, and so you can leave these assumptions to our own devices. That diner looks very familiar. It looks exactly like the diner that was used in Pulp Fiction. I mean, I could be wrong, but remember the opening scene of Pulp Fiction? You see Michael Madsen and Susan Sarandon there. But that looks like the exact same diner. It wouldn't shock me. Look at that. Michael Madsen right there. That wouldn't shock me. Remember Tim Roth and Amanda Plummer were the two actors sitting across from each other. And I swear to you, that is the same diner. If you have the DVD or Blu-ray of Pulp Fiction, Go and watch Pulp Fiction from the start and look at that diner and compare it to what you're seeing right now, right there with Michael Madsen. That looks like the same diner. I bet you it is. I'll have to ask Quentin Tarantino at some point. You can see in this conversation here that Louise still likes this guy, Jimmy. See? They've had a long-term relationship, and you can tell that there's still aspects of the relationship that work for them. And they do love each other and care about each other. It's just that there are things about Jimmy that we obviously see are not good. They're unhealthy, they're toxic and poisonous. And it's not a good look when you see that. That is very much the same diner. I could be wrong, but my goodness, I don't think I am. That diner looks just like the one in Pulp Fiction. Look at the opening and closing scenes of Pulp Fiction and tell me that diner doesn't at least look a little bit like it. Look at this here by Sarandon. I think this is an extraordinary piece of acting. Watch her face, watch the light. And look who should waltz in. Looky here, looky here. It's Thelma. And she is glowing. She is glowing, boy. Oh, she is glowing. You know that look, that look when you've had sex. I don't know that everybody has that look, because maybe the sex was not very fulfilling for them. But obviously, in this particular film, no doubt, it's obviously a fictional film with real things happening. But obviously, Thelma, well, she had a good time, shall we say. But you see, this kind of moment of glowing turns to something different, because now we realize, at least Thelma realizes, that she left all this money that Jimmy had wired Louise in the hotel room. Now, who does that? You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. People leave their cell phones everywhere and anywhere, and it wouldn't be beyond the realm of possibility that some people would be as clumsy as to leave all that money in a hotel room, which you never should do, by the way. Now we're seeing a transition. We're seeing Thelma become the adult or the parent, and we're seeing Louise become the daughter. It's happening right here in this scene, where we see Louise is just anguished at having this money stolen from her. Wouldn't you be? Imagine if someone stole your stimulus check. She's telling Louise, don't you worry about it. And she's telling her to stand up. Can you hear me? Stand up. You hear me? Stand up. You hear? So now you've got Thelma becoming the adult and Louise becoming the adolescent, I guess is probably the kindest way to put it. She's just devastated that her friend would be so reckless and allow for that money to be taken like that after just all of his song and dance. Now you've got these detectives scurrying around. Look at them. Scurrying around to beat the rain, to get out of the rain and get in. I just get this feeling that this was shot on 2 different days, this scene. And like the coverage and pickups were shot on different moments from where you're seeing some of this stuff. And that's a thing that's obviously very common in movies, to shoot some of the scenes on one day and shoot other scenes in the same scene on a different day even, and just kind of splice them together as if they all were shot contemporaneously on the same day in the same moment. This is just, look at this. These men, I think this film is funny in one instance where you've got men dialoguing around each other and they are just so vacuous. And this is not a caricature. I mean, some people would say this is caricature in some ways, but these men behave like this. There are men who behave like this. You know a man who fits this bill. And if you don't, then come on, you need to get out in the world. Well, in the post-COVID world, that's going to be difficult. In the COVID world, it's going to be difficult. But you surely know a man who's done these kinds of things. You surely have. So both Thelma and Louise are in their convertible on the road, and you know there's this kind of I don't say detente, but there is this kind of thing between them that's, I think, a little kind of settled down a bit, and now Thelma is going to do something that's going to really get the attention of Louise in just a few seconds' time. Here they are now, and you see the sun. There's kind of a sunset quality to what you're seeing, and I guess it's because clearly the time in the story suggests that it is sunset, so that's when they're filming this. But nevertheless, it's a very effective shot. as we go from, you know, these gradations of dark and light between the two characters, and then also the tone of the film itself. All of these men are sitting watching this video of Thelma holding up a convenience store. Jesus Christ. Good God, my Lord. I mean, that's some great screenwriting. Even in dialogue like that, I think Kali Curry is really good. I really want her and other women everywhere of any race to get the opportunities that they and their hard work so richly deserve. I mean, that was a great script by Kali Curry, and she won the Oscar for it, and with good reason. There's this freedom again that we're seeing during this movie, and both of these women are riding the open top convertible. Their hair is being ruffled by the wind, and they're having the time of their lives. They just are absolutely adoring it. But there's some things to come that are not going to be anything to do with. You know, it's just going to be a different film and a different two characters, and we're seeing that. And there's a kind of sunset quality here too, even as the wind blows through their hair. Yeah, these disgusting men, pigs. And this is not a caricature. There are men like this. I think everybody who's ever walked the universe, walked the earth, has observed, interacted with, or experienced this kind of juvenile and dangerous, toxic, masculine entity. It's really horrible stuff to be dealing with that constantly. I love the expanse here. There's something kind of this Norman Rockwell quality to some of this. You know, it's the kind of thing you might see on a Rockwell painting. But all of this here now is the stripping down of, I think, the souls of these two people. I mean, I'm not trying to sound overly dramatic here, but you see that there's less and less, you know, natural life or artifacts of life around. There's less of it as they go through this journey, Thelma and Louise. And this moment here is just extraordinary. This lovely moment where no syllables are even uttered, and you watch how you just watch this. Just watch this. These are beautiful images right here, and Adrian Biddle does it again. You know, he is a maestro here. And we see that this is a different thing. Remember, about an hour or so ago, even no less than that, I was telling you about the wardrobe changing, and we're seeing it. We obviously the sunglasses have come off. They aren't a staple anymore, and now we're beginning to do a little archaeological dig into Thelma and Louise as people, as what they stand for, begin to understand what that something might be for them. And when you've got these characters in these habitats, you have to make the most of the spaces that they're in, which means the actors do, which means the writing's got to be strong, which means all of the above are indispensable things for the themes of a film to work. And I think the themes here do work. The whole idea of the relationship between men and women as spouses, the whole idea of what freedom means, what liberation means, and what justice for women means. And you know, these are all critically important. Christopher McDonald. Oh, this is just funny. His Brad Pitt here being hauled through the precinct. And I just love the way that, again, we've got the way that these men are interacting with each other in this environment. I think the only male character who genuinely cares in this film is Harvey Keitel. I mean, he is playing a police detective who, again, I think I said this earlier, really does care about these two women, and yet he's trapped in this male patriarchy. And it's not to try to lionize him or make him a tragic figure or anything, but it is to say that there are a few men in the world who actually want to do something different from what the patriarchy has them doing. And I think in this film, the Harvey Keitel character isn't doing enough, or he thinks he's not doing enough, because there's a whole system that governs what he can or can't do. Then he doesn't want to be someone who is ineffective, yet his position in this patriarchy renders him kind of useless, because despite his best efforts, or his best attempts, he just really has no control or any say over any of this. And I get this feeling that the Harvey Keitel character is someone who is used to getting his own way, but he's just been completely overhauled by a system, but also by the people around him, the men around him. Yeah, Harvey Keitel's character now is getting a little bit of opportunity to take out his frustration about his whole position in this system as a police officer. He's really taking it out on Brad Pitt's character, JD. This is more, I think, about, yes, it's obviously about what JD is saying and lying to him about, but it's also, I think, about the Harvey Keitel character just being frustrated as well. You know, there's something about this scene I find very interesting. It's one of the only scenes that Harvey Keitel has where he really lets loose like that. this part here, some comic relief. Look at this is a real taunt. It's this total cuckolding of Chris McDonald as it's that classic male mine is bigger than yours type thing, this posturing that men do, that at least a lot of men do, not every man, but a lot of men do, strutting around like peacocks, having contests and pulling it out to see if it's bigger than the other person, the next person's, I don't even remember this moment where they're walking like this down the street in the dark. You notice again the wardrobe change. I mean, pretty much, Thelma, hers is getting darker. You got the black, it's got the rich teal color, pastel color, and yeah, it's changing. I just don't remember the scene where she's putting the coins inside the dynaphone phone. I just don't remember that. It probably was, I just wasn't paying attention. How dare I? I just think that, again, you've got this role reversal. The mother, so to speak, the mother figure is taking over again here. And they constantly hand the baton off to each other. So now the mother figure is Louise, played by Susan Sarandon. Thelma's gone back to juvenile or adolescent, I should say. It's fun to see that change in the two actors, and that takes a lot of dexterity to keep that energy going, to change from one type of person into another and then go back and then go across and go backwards and then go across the line and see if someone is willing to do certain things. It's just, I don't know, it's just really, acting is a science, but it's also very organic, and it's also very intuitive at the moment, and there's got to be a certain level of dexterity and generosity that you've got to give as a performer on the big screen, and you've really got to be fully committed. You cannot half-ass this. You really cannot half-ass it. You've got to be at 110%, and that takes a lot of energy and takes up the wazoo, 50 times, 20 times, whatever. You've got to do that, Again, here you've got Louise telling Thelma off because Thelma has gone and told JD that you can look us up in Mexico. And it's like, no, you don't tell him that. And of course, we know that JD has already betrayed Thelma and stolen this money that Louise worked so hard to get Jimmy to wire, and now that money's all gone, and it's turned into a real mess. There is an authentic relationship between these two people, and I totally believe every minute of their rapport. They've probably known each other since high school and or college, and they are looking for something different in their lives because the mundane everyday stuff ain't cutting it anymore. So they want this new lease on life, as I've been saying, and I think that their relationship is one not of 5 minutes ago happenstance, but of 25 years ago, 35 years ago. I think that's what their relationship actually is, but we'll see. I mean, time will tell. Yeah, we're going now again. It gets darker and darker. Now it's at nighttime completely. And look at this. You know, hear this. I mean, Gina Davis's character. I've always wanted to travel. I never got the opportunity. Can you imagine that people, you know, that's just, and when you have a man oppressing you or making life difficult for you in many respects, yeah, you're always going to see these kinds of things. Oh, Marianne Faithfull. This is a really good song. The Ballad of Lucy Jordan. This is really beautiful stuff. I mean, I'm looking at this now thinking, whoa, Adrian Biddle, it's just outstanding. And the way the light captures Susan Sarandon's face again, um, this is just incredible. I mean, a lot of this was shot out there in Utah and in Arizona, I believe, as well, Canyonlands and all that kind of thing. It's just staggering the light. They took generators from what I remember, and they turned off all the main generators and left on a couple of them, and it gives you this effect in the middle of the night. So it looks haunted. It's this haunting, and they're really kind of stripped down to their bare essentials. It's a very effective thing. And look at that. I noticed that's interesting too, because you just saw a contrast between a a day shot and then this sudden jump to night again, and it's very interesting how that happened there. And I don't know if that was a mistake, if that was an abrupt rendering of a transition to sunlight, or if that just was a mistake that was not looked at, because all of a sudden you saw that very bright daytime shot and then you now go back to this nighttime shot. I just found that to be extraordinary. And it's funny, when I first saw this, I never noticed that. You see that? It looks like it's completely different compared to when you see the two of them in a two shot. Well, I guess that's the way it went. You know, that's what they chose to do. And now it's fully light again. So I don't know. Maybe there was some continuity issue, or maybe there wasn't. Maybe that's just the way it was supposed to be. This is Monument Valley, to the best of my recollection. I've been there a couple of times. It's just an incredible sight. I believe that's Monument Valley. I could be wrong, but it seems like it. It's just an incredible sight to look at, to see, to witness that in that expanse. That expanse. It's just phenomenal. All you have to do is just sit there and take pictures all day long. Oh my gosh, it's just an incredible, incredible thing. Here's some of the great acting from Sarandon in the movie. Now, Thelma is referencing jokes about Louise shooting dead the man Holland who had raped Thelma in near the beginning of the film, and she's making light of that as Thelma, and Louise isn't having it. She's not having it. Look. Look at those eyes. Oh my God. It's just incredible. Susan Sarandon, I said it earlier, her eyes, she acts with her eyes. And she reminds me again of Betty Davis, who did the very same thing and was so damn good at it. They really are a speck of dust there with that long distance zoom. Look at that long distance telelens. And they're part of this landscape now. The shades come back on, and we get this feeling now that the movie is transitioned into something a little bit different. You know, you've got this chase now. It's become more of a chase movie. So you had the two men played by Michael Madsen and Brad Pitt respectively, who are trying to chase and woo, you know, they're trying to chase and woo the two lead women, and the next thing is cops are chasing them, and it's this, there's just no escape for a woman. I think that's what this demonstrates, is that there's really no escape for a woman. She's boxed in. And this is women, meaning every type of woman, every background of woman, not white women alone, or, but black women, Asian, Latina. There's this thing, it's just they're trapped because of this patriarchy. And look, he represents it there as the cop with the glasses on, dark shades, aviators. This is, look at that. That's an homage to Psycho right there, with the cop with the dark aviator shades. That's right out of Psycho. There's a moment in Psycho where the cop, dressed just like that, has got these dark aviator shades on, and you see this close-up of him as well. It's really sinister looking, and I think that's the moment. And it's kind of like this whole thing with Psycho too, when you've got Janet Leigh trying to escape these toxic men in her workplace. The one that tries to woo her. And I mean, women are just completely boxed in by these toxic men, that we need to get rid of these toxic men. You're in the way. You're in the way of progress. You're in the way of women. You're in the way of us all. This is really something. This moment here, I think this is one of the best moments in the film, where Gina Davis is just so good here, and Susan Sarandon plays off of it too with the look of surprise, and she's now pointing this gun at the neck or the head of this police officer. What's interesting is it's a reversal from the beginning, where it was the Louise character played by Susan Sarandon, who's pointing a gun, of course, and look at those eyes of Sarandon, who pointed a gun at the rapist, Holland, the rapist, and this who was raping Thelma, and this time it's Thelma who's pointing a gun at a cop. So I just think it's interesting, the symmetry there, now that we are approaching the final stretch of this film. And this is really good screenwriting, good writing from Callie Khoury. And you see the shift again. At this moment, the mother is the Thelma character, played by Gina Davis. She's the one who now is the mother of the piece, and Susan Sarandon's Louise character is now the adolescent. And there's you can see she takes that on here in this scene. My husband wasn't sweet to me. Look how I turned out. That's the line of the film, I think. And it does epitomize everything. You know, that's not a gimmick line at all. I think that's really true. You know, men do a lot of damage. I'm not saying that every man is a menace, but my God, in a world like this, could you imagine if you're a woman, you experience this every day, and every man is kind of like this in some ways. I love that camera zooming into Sarandon like that, because that now means that there's this thing now. They both have guns. They've now crossed over now, right? They've now put a law enforcement person to the sword, not killing them, but have put them in this position, which is into the back of a trunk. That's a position, all right, and thrown away the key. I just love the way this car is driving through this area here. And you see how bold Thelma and Louise have become now on their own adventure. And I wouldn't call it a misadventure. It's they're discovering themselves. I honestly think that. And I don't think that the way for anyone to discover themselves is to do what men do. That to me is not feminism. I mean, of course, I'm going to probably get raked over the coals for saying that. But I'm giving you my honest opinion and assessment. I don't think feminism is comprised of, well, I want to do what the boys do. That to me is imitation. But I don't think that's feminism. I mean, I understand functionally why people would say that it is. But I don't think feminism is that narrow. I think it's a whole lot broader than that. And I think that means that feminists are people who care about the world. I don't think it's about having... you know, I don't know what I'm trying to say about that, but I just think that feminism, and I don't have a problem with the term, I just think that perhaps there's a more expansive definition of that word that needs to be used. If I guess if this film was more of a feminist film, you would see less men in it, perhaps. You wouldn't see men being used as these guiders, because in some ways these men are guiding these women through this whole road trip, right? I think that there's something to be looked at there. I think that this is not this anti-men movie. I think that's garbage. I think that's dishonest and BS. I think that you have a lot of men in this film trying to guide these women, and I don't know that it's entirely only about out of being paternalistic, but I also think it's out of just something else, just genuine concern, you know. Again, what we've got here is this contrast. Look at the distance between the two of them, right? You've got someone there in the background, that's Thelma, and then the foreground, it's Louise. And look at the gulf between them. It's a really powerful moment, actually. So, and I've not noticed that before until now, and I've seen this movie, goodness knows how many times. But you see a shot just there with surrounded in the foreground and Davis in the background in the center of the photo. And then boom, all of a sudden she comes right up there. And it's really powerful. And then you've got Sarandon looking briefly into the camera and her eyes are wide again. There's something really powerful about Sarandon's eyes, and they're perhaps a little unnerving. Not for the sake of context of men and women, but for the sake of, wow, there's an electric charge going through this particular character. And she's revealing that to us. I think what struck me about that shot a few moments ago was this distance and then the framing of the shot with, Gina Davis standing in this very tight little space and then kind of breaking through that space and then coming straight up to us. It was about as imperceptible as it gets. There's some really, really powerful stuff here, like this scene. Something's crossed over in me, Gina Davis is saying here, and I can't go back. And wow, and the music plays and Hans Zimmer's score and stuff like that comes on, and it's really strong. These are really intimate moments we're seeing right here that you're watching. And you see surrounded again her eyes. We don't have to end up on the damn Geraldo show. And who wants to have an empty vault? Who wants to end up there with nothing in the vault? But yeah, there's the realization. This film stops to make you think. It stops the characters. It has the characters stop and pause. And I think that's good too, because what that shows is that these characters are really characters that think and act and feel and contemplate, and they're not just these stick figures that are one dimensional with no history or context. And they're people who have every bit and every right to be where they are and own the space that they're in. And this is the safe space for them. I've talked about safe spaces a lot on the podcast that I do, the Politicrat daily podcast. And I've cited that if you are on social media looking for a safe space and you do not own that social media platform, or you do not control it, then you're never ever going to have a safe space on that social media platform for obvious reasons. So, I think what you're seeing here with Thelma and Louise are two women owning the space that they govern, and fill in the gaps with a lot of imagination and moments of heart to heart and some honesty, which is what women in the position like this would probably be exchanging a lot more of than what we're seeing. Otherwise, you won't have a film if you did that here. But I think it's important to say that women doing this is something that's really helpful, and I wish more men would do this. It's not true of every woman, because I'm not going to do gender stereotyping, and I'm not going to do it for men either. But I am going to say that it would really benefit us as men, for all men, to do these kinds of things, take these kinds of trips where they are expressing their feelings more, because I think the more that a person expresses their feelings, the healthier they are as people. And I think on a basis of mental health, being able to say that, hey, look, this is how I feel about X, Y, and Z, that makes a difference. It does. It confirms your place in the world. It confirms your point of view of how you stand in the world and where you stand. Oh yeah, this is really a line that's going to get a woman into bed with you. Hey, I've got a big dick. Oh, are you ready for that? I mean, yeah, sure. Come on. 99.99999% of women will not even give you the time of day with a line like that. Not even. In fact, I'd raise that to 100% of women wouldn't give you the time of day. Unless there's someone who will tell me otherwise. This is B.B. King's Better Not Look Down. and it's playing now with just a little bit more of this movie to go. But that song famously plays during the closing credits, or I should say during the ending of the film. In fact, during the original ending of the film. And it plays there for some really ironic effect because, of course, the original ending of this film was very different from what you're going to see now. And you will get to see it. Obviously, there's a lot going on and there's been a lot happening, but it's something that is important. We need to be able to express ourselves and do so in a positive way. See this wardrobe here now? You notice that Thelma is wearing this dark in this black t-shirt and wearing these jet black shades, and she's certainly abandoned the trappings of a male-dominated patriarchy, which means she's now free to be who she really is, and she's not trying to fit the dictates or conscriptions of, you know, the military or of anything regimented. You know, she has got no lipstick on. Remember, I said earlier that, yeah, you know, you'll soon see that disappear. And Susan Sarandon as well, playing Louise, also doesn't have any of that on. So I think it makes a real difference. And look at them both. And you know, this is really something, you know. But you see the wardrobe change there. It's very pronounced. So they have done their act again, and they now drive off to their next location. You see, there's a confidence about Thelma and Louise now. Now that they are in the ascendancy, there's a confidence in them. They now feel that they can do and get away with anything, and they can be anyone they want to be. I love this. This is one of my favorite scenes in the movie. Rastafari. This is probably the only man in the film portrayed with any kind of positivity at all. Although I kind of say that kind of facetiously, because I don't think men are portrayed badly in this film at all. But this scene here is the truth, and you hear the late great Johnny Nash, who passed away just a few short months ago, with his anthem song "I Can See Clearly Now." I mean, it's just absolutely delightful, and I just love this moment here. This is just classic. It's so interesting because nothing's crossed in this guy at all. And I love it says approach with caution, and the camera has zoomed in onto him. And I think that's the guy you should be approaching with caution. And he's just not learned anything. And then very few of the men that you see on the screen have learned a darn thing about their actions, about the society that they are being governed by, and what they're ready to do. It's really frightening. There's that smashing through barbed wire fences. I mean, there's all these symbolic things that these women are doing. These women are doing. It's like they're breaking through these barriers as women for the first time ever. It's just a film that has such import in some ways because of how it's set up and because of this shot here. Look at this reprise again of what we saw at the beginning without the smoke. At the beginning, and now there's smoke, and you see where there's smoke, there's fire, and you've got the five O's that were tailing you. And this is the chase movie now. It's become the chase movie, and everybody is on top of this. You know, you're not going to let this go. If you watch a movie like this now, you are in for the long haul for the rest of it because you know that something's going to happen here. And when I first watched this film, I had absolutely no idea what was going to be happening. You know, I was stunned. I'll talk about that in a few moments, in a few minutes. It's a marked contrast, this scene, to the scene that was just played a few minutes back when they're driving through Monument Valley so peacefully, and now there's all of this, all these men are chasing them with their police cars. It's about a dozen of them or so maybe, and they're all running after two women who just want to live their lives. I mean, I get it, they're wanted for murder, they're wanted for this and the other. It's, I don't know, it's just, there's something great about them escaping on their terms, but there's also something very sad about how it's reacted to by not just the police in this film, but just in real life, how I think some people may have looked at that as a bad thing. And I know that, you know, those of you kind of contemplating this movie can think of all kinds of things and reasons, you know, why these movies are where they are, and how people think about them, if they do at all. You see these close-ups now, and you see the shadows that the hats are producing. Look at this over Gina Davis. A very effective shot there. You get to see that. Remember I told you earlier about the dark and the light and the merging in the same scene sometimes, the vacillation that happens within a few seconds, and you're seeing it stylistically on a cinematography level where you've got both of them bathed in light, in low light, ambient light. There's very little generator, if anything, there because it's all ambient light, and you see there's this sense of what do you call it? You know, there's a muting of the scenery, of the lighting. It's kind of dimmed, and you know, because we know that, and it even looks like there's a color fade too, and we know what that means. We know, and we see the helicopter there, and it's a long way down. I've been to the Grand Canyon on a couple of occasions. It's one heck of a structure. And a lot has happened there over the last God knows how many years. Now they are really at the edge of something, and there they are, right there. Look how close they are now. I mean, this is really something that they probably did not wake up this morning or the morning before thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to do this today. I'm going to have my friend with me and we're going to do this adventure that results in us. Well, I think you know what happens next. There are standards in movies, right, where we get to see that there are choices made by characters who have done things that are objectively wrong or evil, and we expect that in the movie convention something is going to happen to them where they don't get away with anything. I guess why one of the reasons why people call this film groundbreaking is because the ending is not what you expect. I mean, that's not the only thing why I think people might call it groundbreaking, even if I don't necessarily. It is because of the way the movie ends and where it ends. I think that when you look at a movie like this, and it's interesting. Susan Sarandon's character says, "All this for us." It's like, you know, it's not TV cameras, it's guns. But when you look at a movie like this, you really do see that the end. There's an expectation of what the end's going to be. Are they going to go down like Bonnie and Clyde, or Peggy Cummings and John Dahl in Gun Crazy from 1950, or are they going to go down in a different way? Are they going to go down in a way that seems something different? It's not even about martyrdom, it's about what freedom means to two women in 1991, or in 2021, or in 2031, or 2051, or in a year beyond that, you know? And you see the frustration of the Harvey Keitel character, because he knows he's really ineffectual. He cares about these two characters, but he's under strictures that govern what he can do, and he can't do a whole heck of a lot. I love this. This is really tender and intimate. Two women, two people just talking about what they really have in front of them, which is the Grand Canyon. And there's this fantasy tale in a twisted way, but in an empowering way too, this fairy tale that they just can keep going like this. Let's just keep going. I mean, look what we've gone through in this world, in this society. Look at this. Why don't we just make this ours? And then my goosebumps start to come. Maybe yours do too, if you have any, at this moment watching this. It's really the end of their lives or the beginning of something for them. And we will only look at this in the lens we look at it at, and we will look at it in this really powerful way right here with the clasping of their hands in this really powerful way, right? About now. Oh gosh, that zoom in push, and then whoa, freeze frame, and then you just, wow, and then you come back over the other side and you see them again, and you know that they're in heaven. I think they're in heaven. Maybe you might think they're in heaven, or maybe you might not. Oh, it's just that grabs you all the time. And you really have to see that with the music to feel it. But it's powerful, and then you just see them again and you relive the fragments of their lives. And all they wanted to do is be who they are. I mean, that's all. That's all. It's like all that anybody wants in this world is to be themselves and to live, to be free and unencumbered, to face challenges, but to be themselves and be themselves on their own terms. And it's that ending gets me every time, no matter what. 30 years ago, when this film came out, it did. 30 years later, it still does. No matter how many times I watch this movie, that ending is it. And by the way, you must watch the original ending to this movie, and you will hear the sound of B.B. King's Better Not Look Down. And it's played in this really ironic and kind of not facetious, but kind of taunting way. You've got to see that original ending. I know it's floating around on YouTube because someone put it in my Twitter handle at the popcorn REEL. And so you can see it there, but I think it's really good to watch that on Blu-ray. Well, it's not good, but it's recommended. I'd recommend to watch it on Blu-ray or DVD. But that original ending was roundly panned by audiences that it was test screened for. And so they had to reshoot the ending. Ridley Scott did. He had to reshoot that ending. It's really an ending that just leaves nothing to the imagination. That's the bottom line. But this ending, I think, was much more complex and much more interesting. They did do it their way. That's the way I look at the ending. They did it their way. And some people will say, "Oh no, they didn't." But their predicament is in the eyes of the beholder, right? If you're a man, you might think they just, oh, why do they do that? If you're a woman, you might be saying freedom, that's great. Or you might be saying that if you're a man and not if you're a woman. I don't know. But again, the reprise of the song here in the closing credits by Glenn Fry of the Eagles, formerly of the Eagles, Part of Me, Part of You. And it's there's a comforting tenderness to that song now. It's a refrain, nonetheless, but it just kind of encapsulates what we've watched these last 2+ hours. There is something very haunting about Thelma and Louise. It's an uplifting movie. It's a sad movie in some ways, of course, but there's a hauntingness about it and a defiance about it that I love. That I don't know that it's really, again, groundbreaking, but it's a different type of movie, and it's a refreshing movie, and I love it. And I hope you've appreciated this commentary, this feature-length commentary, this unofficial feature-length audio commentary for the film Thelma and Louise, written by Callie Curry, directed by Ridley Scott. I'm Omar Moore. You can find me on the Popcorn Reel and at the Popcorn REEL on Twitter.